legendary bass player Victor Wooten. Welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me here.
You guys, you and your brothers are coming to Australia in May, which we're very excited about.
Yeah.
Just before we talk about that, just to give people perspective on how long you've been playing bass, you were around 6 or 7. You were playing in clubs with Curtis Mayfield, which is incredible. The bass would have been bigger than you. Your parents must have been very encouraging about the family playing music.
Yeah, they were encouraging. Well, at first, everything you said is true, because of my brothers. I'm the youngest of the 5 boys, so they had me playing very, very young. And it's true, we did open some shows for Curtis Mayfield when I was 5, 6, or 7, somewhere around that time. But our parents were encouraging about whatever we did, as long as we did it from a good place. In other words, we had to be good people first. Very important to both of our parents. And then they knew that whatever we did, we'd be doing it from a good place.
Yeah. It sounds like you didn't have much choice about which instrument you were going to play. All the other spots were taken.
Exactly. Regi was playing guitar. Roy, also known as Future Man with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, he was playing drums. Rudy sax. Regi taught Joseph how to play keyboards, and they needed a bass player, so he taught me how to play bass. And I never thought of it much of like a choice or anything. It was just my way of fitting in with the brothers. I got to be an equal with the brothers when I played the bass.
Yeah. As we said, you're coming to Australia in May. You must have been to Australia many times with different projects.
I
Uh,
have mostly with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones.
yeah. Do you remember your first trip here?
I do. I do remember it. It was with Bela Fleck. I think we played Byron Bay Festival and a few other places, Melbourne, Adelaide, I think. But yeah, I remember that first time because I can remember that long flight and just being in a totally new place. I loved it. I'm looking forward to coming back.
So what can we expect from this tour? Do the Wooten Brothers have such a thing as a set list?
We will have a set list, but it'll be rare that we stick to it. We go back a long way, so a big repertoire. My brothers know more songs than I do. So we'll have a plan, but who knows where it's going to go. It's sort of like you may have a plan of what questions to ask, but the conversation could take its own turn, and you're good enough and fluid enough to go with it and still get what you need. Music is the same way for us. It's like talking to people. But when we play, we're not talking just to each other. We're conversing with the audience. So the audience, whether they know it or not, may dictate which direction we go, and we will be fluid enough to go where we at least think it needs to go.
Yeah. But when you play with a group of musicians for a long time, you get to second guess the other players on stage. You kind of know where they're going. With the Wooten Brothers, I wonder how much the family DNA also comes into play. Is there more than musical intuition going on?
Absolutely. It's intuition, but intuition is a lot, uh, basically, and you're taking unconscious cues, and so some of the cues started long ago, when I was a kid, and some of it maybe is what we think of as intuition. But I know how my brothers play. We know how each of us play, so we'll hear it in their playing or the body language that might tell us where to go. And if someone's taking a solo or Joseph is singing or anyone, you kind of know when they're done or when they're not, sort of like with speaking. But I guess the closest thing I can relate to it is having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. While you guys have played together so many times, you don't have a long recording history. Is that because you're just too busy playing with other people?
Well, yes and no. But most people didn't know about the Wooten brothers until we were playing with other people. But we did do some recording when we were younger. there just wasn't a big avenue to get it out. It wasn't like like it is now. Anybody can put music out, and it can instantly be heard around the world. It wasn't like that. It was expensive to record. You know what I'm talking about. It wasn't so easy. So recently, we found some old recordings from us. I mean, back when I was 5, some stuff when, my brothers were in college. We found about 3 different levels of recordings. Some of them we actually did on 2-inch reel-to-reel tape in a studio. And we had forgotten about it, but we found it. So you can bet that that's going to be coming out sometime in the near future.
Wow, we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
What have you learned about getting a good bass sound in the studio over the years?
Well, you know what I've actually found that is if I play well enough, people almost won't care what it sounds like. If I think about some of the recordings that we heard, sometimes like a photograph, sometimes the older and dingier the photograph, the more special it is. So, but the main thing is playing well. If you play well enough, people are gonna love what it sounds like. But having been in the studio, I'm in a studio right now. If you can see, I got consoles here, booths and rooms in the back, instruments all around, and so one of the things I have learned is how my best sound is direct. But in that booth, that room right behind me, you can kind of see the door right in that room. How do I point to it? That way, right in that room. There it is. Right in that room, I have speakers set up and a microphone. So I can plug my bass in and go through an amp also. So sometimes I'll blend the two so that I have choices. But my best sound is going direct. That sounds the most like me. The least that's in the way is just me and my bass guitar. That seems to be the best sound.
Yeah, I see the Wooten Brothers have a session at the at the upcoming NAMM Show, which I'm looking forward to attending.
Sweet.
Do you enjoy the NAMM Show, mixing with other musicians and checking out the gear?
I really do. I really do enjoy the NAMM Show. It's a chance for me to get to see a lot of my friends, as well as meet a lot of people. Sometimes it's hard to get around the NAMM Show. It's the 1 or 2 times a year where I get to feel like what it's really like to be famous. And I'm glad I don't have to live like that every day. But it's fun for a while. But I love meeting people, seeing new gear, meeting the companies that I get to work with. And I don't get to see them much because I'm out touring. But a lot of the times, if I'm at a place, there's only one bass player, and it's me. But sometimes at the NAMM Show, I get to see my bass brothers and sisters and hang out with them and fun concerts at night. And just, to be around thousands of people that are like you, love music, sort of like being in college. And I never got to do that. So the NAMM Show is fun like that for me.
Yeah. Well, what was it about the Fodera bass that won you over initially?
Yeah, Fodera. And it just so happens this is their 40th year anniversary. And I've been playing their basses for 40 years. Wow, that really makes us both old. But the thing that got to me first was the feel of it. I'm still such a Stanley Clarke fanatic. I'm a fan, a big Stanley Clarke fan. And Stanley played an alembic bass. And my parents bought me an alembic bass when I was in the 7th grade. But it was the Series 1, really big. And I've always been short and small. So this bass is like, to hit the lowest note, I still have to pull over with my thumb and play it. Even now, it's too long, too big. But I played that for quite a few years. And when my brothers and I were recording for Arista Records in the early 80s, we were in a studio, and a friend introduced me to Fodera, and Joey Laricella, who was their spokesperson and still there making the basses with Vinny Fodera. He came to the studio with my first Fodera bass. And the first thing, without plugging it in or anything, it just felt right. It was smaller than my alembic. And wow, man, it just felt right. It felt like me, the way it should feel. So without even plugging it in, I fell in love with it. And I've been lucky enough to be playing those same basses for 40 years.
Yeah. In what situations would you pick up a fretless bass rather than a fretted bass?
When the music asks for it. That's number one. Sometimes the music is asking for something from the bass, and sometimes it might be a keyboard bass, not strings, but keyboard, or it might be an upright bass, or it might be a tuba. But you have to let the music speak to you, and I want to be a bass player that's ready for all of that. In other words, I play an instrument called the bass guitar, but music has a role that's called bass. The bass guitar fulfills the role that music needs. So if I want to be a bassist, I want to be as good at fulfilling that role as possible. So I need to make sure I can play stand-up bass, double bass, right? I need to make sure I can play keyboard bass, fretted, fretless, 5-string, 6-string. Whatever you ask of me, I want to be able to fulfill that role. But in order to do it the best, I need to allow music to inform me about what it's looking for. And sometimes it may not be what I'm the best at, but I need to do what music is asking for.
Yeah. What are some recorded bass lines of other players that you've admired over the years and still marvel at?
Sure. One of them is a guy named Willie Weeks, who played with Donny Hathaway on this live record, Donny Hathaway Live. And all of his bass parts were so good, and we learned them as kids. Regi's my oldest brother, Regi, who plays guitars, is one of my favorite all-time bass players. But he pointed me to, actually it was our aunt that pointed us to this solo that Willie Weeks took on a song called Everything is Everything on that Donny Hathaway Live record. And it just knocked our socks off because the solo felt so good. It wasn't terribly flashy, but it just grooved and it built step by step. So that was one of the first solos I ever learned, was from Willie Weeks. But I also love listening to Larry Graham when he was with Sly and the Family Stone. There's a song called Everyday People, where Larry Graham played one note, the whole song. But he plays with his thumb, and that was new back in the 70s. We'd never heard that. So that new sound. Then Stanley Clarke came, coming up with songs like School Days and other songs with Chick Corea and Return to Forever. His bass playing had fire behind it, like I'd never heard. And then a few years later, I heard this fretless bass, like I'd never heard it, playing harmonics, making it sound like a piano, grooving like crazy. Jaco Pastorius. Yeah, but then you have the Beatles, you have the Gap Band, you have Earth, Wind, and Fire. There's always been great music and great bass lines. So we've never been hurting for that.
Yeah. You mentioned Stanley Clarke. You played with Stanley and Marcus Miller in SMV, three of the greatest bass players together. What are your strongest memories of that experience?
Wow, some of my strongest memories was just being nervous around those guys, and it felt good to be nervous because I'm usually just in my world. But all of a sudden, Greg, I'm with two superheroes that I've looked up to since I was in single digits. And here I am standing next to them, playing next to them, recording next to them as an equal. That wasn't easy to do. It's like I want to shine their shoes and bring them water and stuff. I'm the servant, but I'm being treated as an equal. So it took me a while to kind of stand on my own 2 feet and be the musician that I'm supposed to be with these guys. But I also learned a lot from them on the road. I'd see them working on movies. I paid attention when they called their wives, all kinds of stuff. I learned a lot from them. And I also learned that they're human. There was one song that I wrote on the record, and it had a part that Stanley had the solo on, and at first he wasn't totally hearing it, so he wrote down the chords and took it to the piano and figured it out there. And then he went, came back to the bass and just wore it out. So I don't know how to do that, but I was learning their different methods. So it was great to be around the greatest, some of the greatest ever. One thing I'll say, Greg, we have to remember the electric bass is young. It's very, very young. It may be 80 years old by now. I'm not quite sure. So we get to be around the inventors, the pioneers. It's like being in the age of the Wright brothers in the first flight. Chuck Rainey, who's older than the electric bass, is still around and still playing. And I know him, he's my friend.
Mm.
The heroes like Stanley Clark, Marcus Miller, Larry Graham, Ron Carter, they're friends of mine. And it's unbelievable to me that that happens and I'm a part of it. So it's just amazing to me that I get to be a part of really kind of still the birth, the infancy of this instrument we call the electric bass. So to be friends with the people who have shaped it is unbelievably just so much fun. And I admire these guys and girls so much. Carol Kay, so many wonderful people. And I've gotten to meet most of my heroes.
Yeah. You have so many projects going on and so many artists seeking your skills, but you always find time to teach. And in fact, you have the Wooten Woods retreat. Why is it so important to pass on your knowledge?
Well, for one, I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. That's the main thing. But I also know that I wouldn't be who I am without people passing on knowledge to me, from my parents to my grandparents to my aunts and uncles to my brothers. Right? A lot of people find out I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and people always say, "Oh man, you must have got beat up all the time," but never had that. And I mean, never. No fights, no arguments. And I always tell people that instead of beating me up, my brothers held me up, and they still hold me up. Right? They let me get all the credit. Regi lets me get all the bass credit and technique credits, and he's the one that showed me all of it. So I like passing it on, and I love seeing that light in a person's eyes when they get it, when they understand this thing. But I also like it because there's a lot of people that make music difficult. It's like they want it to be hard, so you can only belong to this elite club. It's not hard, right? Music is easy, and it should be for everyone. And I want to make it easy for you so you can get to playing right away. Don't sit in a room and study it. Let's play first. And then, just like learning to talk, you learn to talk for years first, then you study it later. I like that method. So I want to try to give people an easier way into this world we call music.
Yeah. One last quick question, because we're running out of time. When people look back on music history in, say, 50 years, how would you like to be remembered?
That's up to other people. And, I'm not going to try to put words into your mind or into your mouth. It's whatever that people want to think. The main thing is how I feel about myself at the end of time. That's the thing, because we know a lot of people in history, actors, chefs, comedians, who have done so much and made us so happy, but in the end, they weren't happy. And many of them took their own life. Mm. And my parents have always told us that it's what you think about yourself. If you do something wrong and nobody knows about it, you know about it. But if you do something right and nobody knows about it, you know about it. So it really comes down to what I think of me. And I hope that I can live my life with good understanding and good feeling about who I am to myself. And if other people love me, that's even better.
Well, Victor, it's been great to chat. We look forward to seeing the Wooten Brothers in Australia in May, and hopefully we get to say hi at the NAMM Show.
Let's make it happen, Greg. I look forward to seeing you in person.